Subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified about the highlights of India's smartest podcast, The Ranveer Show. This is TRS Clips. Do you think that the cyclone in Bombay happened for a particular reason now? Because in 28 years of my existence, I've never come across anything so intense. You're just staring at it. Like, what is happening here? Never seen wind speeds like that. My mom went to see what's happening in the balcony. She almost flew out.
Yeah,
It was intense. And we had to hold her back. And I've never seen anything like it. But why is this happening, according to you?
So I'm not a meteorologist, but at least from my conversation with fishers, and fishers come with a lot of traditional knowledge. They'd probably look at the wind and they'll tell you that this month should not be an eastward blowing wind, but it's eastward and there's going to be jellyfish in the water. And sure enough, next day there'll be jellyfish in the water. So there's a lot of confusion that's happening within them as well. And that for me is more alarming than, let's say, a meteorological report. But the truth is that ocean temperatures, ocean currents, and therefore existing wind patterns, high pressure, low pressure systems are changing. And that's making weather systems really unpredictable. We've just had the latest IPCC report. It's filled with a lot of big terms, but very simply put, that's what's happening. Ocean currents are shifting. Oceans are warmer than they were a few decades or centuries ago. That means that the air that is in contact with the water is of a different pattern. That means that when it comes close to land, just like our southwest monsoons are a high pressure, low pressure system, wind flows from high pressure to low pressure, those pressure differentials are different. They're either too extreme or they're too closely packed together. And so you have patterns that have not been seen before. And that's what's causing cyclones in April, in May, which are not cyclone months. They're not even monsoon months, right? And what's happening with that is because coastal resilience has been reduced. Bombay's coastal road, the flyover, the sea, whatever it's called, the Sea Link, the Shivaji statue, the reclamation that has happened over the last 100 years, whether it's the Mayim or Kolaba or all of that, the coastline is no longer able to absorb what it used to with surges that happen in these storms.
What used to be there on the coastline? Like coral reefs or something like that too?
So there's again this idea that every coastline used to have mangroves. I mean, a lot of our coastline have mangroves, but a lot of our coastlines don't. They were rocky, they were muddy, they were clayey, they had estuarine river ecosystems. So they used to absorb shocks in different ways. So a rocky outcrop didn't have mangroves because it could withstand, and it would always be a cliff or at a height, impervious rock that can withstand the sea. But we've had a loss of all of that. So when you build, let's say, you put tripods on Versova beach, the beach, just like sand in rivers, has an immense capacity to absorb water, to absorb that shock. And the narrower and the thinner and the lesser those barriers become, the more the city gets impacted. And mangroves absorb that kind of water. Sand absorbs that kind of water. Canals and rivers that are healthy, wide enough, absorb that canal. Because the Mithi, let's say, it didn't have a pillar in the middle of it. It didn't have BKC's waste going into it. A storm surge would have taken it all the way to Sanjay Gandhi National Park. It would have swelled, the sand would have absorbed the current, but that doesn't happen. It just overflows into the banks and causes flooding into whatever reduced space it has. So coastal resilience is reduced as well. And then we've got urbanization. I mean, big buildings coming up on the coastline, big infrastructure coming up on the coastline. These are not meant to be there. But somehow we believe that the wonder of technology can keep up with. And there's that battle.
Man's greed for money. Because every time you're building a big building, you're also selling flats.
Yeah.
You're also possibly going through some form of money laundering in that process. So at the end of the day, it's the chase for money that's destroying ecology. But
yeah, chase for money. And interestingly, of course, money is one big part of it. But what are we doing? We're taking funds that are meant to be for the public and channeling it into very private lives. For example, what could have been a transit corridor for trains has become a sea link. A majority of the people don't use cars, right? Let one driver and one person is going to Nariman Point to work every day. So we've also taken funds that could have helped the public at large with good infrastructure and fueled it into very narrow interests where the number of people who benefit from it is less, but the people who get impacted by it is more. The fishers at Worli, let's say, being a perfect example. They've got their, the Haji Ali Worli Bay, that's entirely now taken over. So the fishers there, it's a very rich ecosystem. In fact, a few years ago with our friends, we had started something called Marine Life of Mumbai, which was just to take people out on spring tide days into the intertidal zones. get off the road and walk into the ocean because the tide really recedes. And on those days, you see how alive this city's coast, in spite of everything, is. We run a whole Instagram page. It's fascinating. And all of that is gone, which means people who live there are gone. So I think there's also that which we really need to be concerned about. Because,
No, go on.
No, it's just that shift of bad infrastructure that takes from public funds and gives it to a few private hands. It's a very unequal kind of policy making that's happening, right? And we need to be more concerned about it.